inspired by real-life events. Narrator Adil grew up in a small semi-urban town on the edge of Rangpur, where life never felt like it was moving fast, but it always felt like it was pressing heavily on everyone's shoulders. And from his earliest memories, he understood that people around him were not living with dreams as their priority, but with survival as their daily responsibility. And his father was a quiet, hard-working man who ran a small grocery shop from morning until late night, counting coins carefully, dealing with customers politely, even when he was exhausted, while his mother managed the household with silent strength, turning limited income into enough life through careful planning, sacrifice, and emotional endurance. And Adil grew up watching this rhythm of struggle, absorbing it so deeply that he began to understand life before he even understood himself. And in school, he was an average student, not exceptional, not invisible, just someone who existed quietly between expectations, often sitting near the window, watching the sky as if answers to life were written somewhere beyond it. And that habit of observing slowly turned into imagination, and imagination slowly turned into a quiet dissatisfaction with the idea that life must only be about repetition and survival. And after completing his studies, he reached a moment where Sai silently forced him into a decision that would shape everything that followed. Because two paths appeared at the same time. One was a stable local job in a small office with fixed salary, predictable routine, and social approval that came with safety, while the other was a risky opportunity in a startup in the city that offered uncertainty, instability, long hours, and no guarantee except the possibility of building something meaningful from nothing. And for many days, Adil carried both choices inside his mind without speaking them out loud, because every voice around him pushed him towards safety. Every relative repeated the importance of stability, and every logical argument supported the idea of a secure life. But inside him, there was a quiet resistance that refused to disappear. Not loud, not emotional, but steady, like something waiting for him to acknowledge it. And one evening, he sat beside his father outside their small home under a dim light, listening to the sound of distant traffic and the slow rhythm of life passing by. And after a long silence, he asked, "Baba, what if I choose the risky path and fail completely?" And his father looked at him for a moment, not with fear, but with understanding, and said, "Failure is painful, but regret is heavier, because regret never ends. It only repeats itself." And those words stayed inside Adil like a permanent echo. And after nights of thinking, confusion, and silent internal conflict, he finally made his decision to join the startup, stepping into a world that felt unfamiliar from the very first day. Because the city office was small, slightly chaotic, filled with young people trying to build something without fully knowing how, and nothing felt stable, not even time itself. And in the beginning, Adil tried to adapt quickly, working long hours, learning everything he could, trying to prove his worth through effort and consistency. But slowly he realized that effort alone does not guarantee direction. And there were nights when he returned to his rented room completely drained, sitting in silence under a dim yellow light, staring at the ceiling fan, rotating endlessly as if time itself had no destination. And during those moments, he would think about home, about his mother, preparing simple meals with care, about his father returning late from work with silent exhaustion. And a strange guilt would rise inside him, as if choosing ambition meant abandoning comfort. But at the same time, something inside him refused to let go. as if he was standing at the edge of something he could not yet fully understand. And in the startup, he met people like Farhan, Imran, Sohel, Imtiaz, Sohela, and Rafi, each carrying their own invisible struggles, each trying to build something meaningful out of uncertainty. And together they formed a fragile team bound not by stability, but by shared confusion, hope, and pressure. And often they would sit late at night, surrounded by unfinished plans, scattered papers, and empty cups of tea that had long gone cold. And Imran once said with a tired smile, "If this works, people will call us smart. And if it fails, we will just become a story of what not to do." And they all laughed softly. But beneath that laughter was exhaustion that no one fully admitted. And as months passed, the startup entered a difficult phase, where funding delays began affecting salaries, clients became inconsistent, and pressure slowly turned into an invisible weight that followed everyone everywhere. And Adil found himself becoming quieter, more reflective, observing more before speaking, because he realized that in chaos, observation often reveals what reaction cannot. And during this time, his family back home also began facing subtle difficulties, especially his father, whose health started weakening after years of continuous work, though he never spoke about it openly. And Adil would call home regularly, trying to sound normal, hearing reassurances that everything was fine, not realizing that those reassurances were often meant to protect him from distraction. Until one night, everything changed when his phone rang late and his mother's voice came through trembling and broken, saying, "Your father collapsed today." And in that instant, everything inside Adil froze, because suddenly deadlines, meetings, and ambitions felt distant and meaningless compared to the fear of losing someone who had always been his silent foundation. And he rushed back home immediately, traveling through a journey that felt heavier than distance itself. And when he reached the hospital and saw his father lying weak, connected to machines, breathing slowly, Adil felt something inside him break in a way he could not describe, because the man he had always seen as strong now looked fragile in a way he was never prepared for. And he sat beside him, holding his hand, feeling the weight of years of sacrifice inside that single touch. And his father slowly opened his eyes and said softly, "Don't stop your life because of me. Just make it worth it." And those words carried both love and pain together in a way that stayed inside him forever. And after days of uncertainty, his father's condition stabilized, but never fully returned to what it once was. And Adil returned to the city, carrying a different kind of emotional weight, one that made every decision heavier, every failure sharper, and every success more meaningful. And the startup soon reached one of its most critical phases, where everything felt like it might collapse at any moment. And one rainy night, when the office was nearly empty and silence filled every corner, Adil sat with Farhan and Imran, listening to the rain hitting the glass like a slow reminder of uncertainty. And Farhan said quietly, "Maybe this is where most people give up." And Imran replied after a pause, "Or maybe this is where people finally understand who they are." And Adil stayed silent for a long time, feeling everything he had lived until that moment collided inside him. The struggle, the fear, the responsibility, the memory of his father, the pressure of survival. And then he finally said slowly, "If we stop now, everything becomes just pain. But if we continue, even pain becomes meaning." And that night, they did not quit. Instead, they rebuilt everything from the ground up, rethinking strategies, restructuring operations, learning from mistakes instead of hiding from them. And slowly, step by step, things began to change, Not suddenly but gradually, like light returning after a long darkness, and years passed with continuous effort, and Adil changed deeply through that journey, becoming more grounded, more patient, more aware that success is not about speed but about endurance. And one evening after a long day, he stood on the rooftop of the office building with Farhan and Imran beside him, watching the city lights stretch endlessly into the distance. And Imran said quietly, "We almost gave up many times." And Adil replied with calm certainty, "Yes, but every time we continued, we built a stronger version of ourselves." And in that moment, he understood something permanent, that life is not defined by how easy the path is, but by the decision to keep walking when the path becomes uncertain. And every hardship carries a lesson that only time reveals, and every choice shapes a future version of yourself. You will one day meet with understanding. And as the wind moved across the city, he realized that true strength is not never falling, but choosing to rise again after every fall. And the real meaning of life is not found in avoiding struggle, but in transforming it into direction. Because in the end, a person is not measured by the comfort they choose, but by the resilience they build when comfort disappears. And that truth stayed with him like a quiet light that never faded, reminding him that every ending people fear is often just the beginning of finally becoming who they were always meant to be.